Hey guys, what's happening? Back with another video, and as I promised, gonna do a review for Spider-Man No Way Home. Hope you guys had a fantastic holiday with your friends and loved ones, and I know you guys are gonna have a great, fantastic New Year coming up too, so it's gonna be great. I took my family to see Spider-Man No Way Home, and they loved it. After the movie, they were asking questions if it was going to all tie in to the previous Spider-Man movies that came before. And with the rumors that are coming up with Spider-Man 4 coming out and Amazing Spider-Man 3 in the works, I have to say that it's going to be a big yes. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they're going to do after they top Spider-Man No Way Home. So it's going to be fantastic. And the movie's great. It's phenomenal. And so you guys are definitely going to enjoy it. For those who haven't seen the movie just yet, you guys are definitely going to enjoy it. So, but just, of course, giving you a fair warning, right now we're going to break down the spoilers of what happened in the movie. So, I mean, I pretty much figured that since everyone has already saw it by now and seen all the spoilers. I mean, heck, might as well go ahead and just talk about it and do it right now. So, but I've got Erik Voss, who's part of new Rockstars on YouTube. He's really good with breaking down clues of Easter eggs, which is what they are, Easter eggs. Easter eggs are just clues that are hidden that you really can't see in the movies. So you have to have a really keen eye to know what you're seeing. So, and I've actually spotted a few, but I know Erik Voss and the guys at Real Rejects and even the guys at Comic Pop, Sal, Ethan, Ben, and Tiffany, they're good with stuff like this, even including my boy Rob Jefferson from ComicExplains. Shout out to my boy. They're good with stuff like that, and so am I, but I'm always learning when it comes to spotting Easter eggs and everything like that. So with me being fans of Marvel Comics and having all the comics in general, they're really great. So it's basically just everything that's I've ever hoped for. So it's pretty cool. But without further ado, we're gonna dive into it. So we're gonna follow along with Erik Voss, and we're gonna go ahead and spot all the Easter eggs and clues that I've seen, or if everybody else seen, or probably missed, and we're gonna break it down. So without further ado, let's do it.
Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this
That's
is a
my
breakdown
guy.
of Spider-Man No Way Home, a true Spider-Verse event that, start to finish, is a love letter to the web slinger's full cinematic history.
That
not
it
only by
is.
bringing back past Peter Parker's, but in even subtler ways.
The crowd was
Adding
hyped.
little
It was excited too.
moments that prove how, despite all these guys' different backgrounds, these dorks were destined to cross paths and rescue each other. So I'm gonna break this down scene by scene for everything you might have missed. And folks, I think I found more Easter eggs in this movie than I have in anything I've ever broken down on this channel in 5 years. Before we begin, you can celebrate Spider-Man No Way Home by checking out our awesome merch at newrockstarsmerch.com. We have this amazing
I have to
new
get the
limited
merch.
edition shirt, one of my favorite shirts Epic Hero Shop has ever made, called Strange Entanglement.
I gotta get that
Can't wait to
too.
find
Strange
my favorite
Entanglement.
Christmas gift.
I'll
You can
post
get
it later
yours at
too.
newrockstarsmerch.com. And thank you to Boxu for sponsoring this video. More on them later. Okay, the opening Marvel Studios title card has been updated slightly so that if you look closely on the whole of the R, replacing Rocket, who was in recent MCU titles, is now Peter Parker. The moment he came back through
Yeah,
that portal,
I noticed
joined
that
Cap
too,
and
because Rocket used to appear in the R section of the Marvel introduction, and now Peter's in it too, so I caught that one.
game. This movie will also make grown men cry, seeing Spider-Man arrive through portals twice. So we
Everybody
open
was hyped
immediately
about that.
where
I was
Parker
too.
left off, the audio of the news broadcast of J. Jonah Jameson's Daily Bugle revealing Peter Parker's identity by Mysterio's doctored footage. Director John Watts recreated that 2019 scene to near perfect detail before it ended by cutting off Peter's F-bomb.
Yeah.
was a callback to
And see, that was actually pretty cool too, that they've actually went back to one of the elements of Far From Home as well. And you know what? Every time when I see J. Jonah Jameson's Daily Bugle net, it reminds me of Face the Facts from, or just the facts from Spider-Man's Marvel Spider-Man. It was actually pretty cool that they've actually took elements from the video game and put them in the movies as well. So Just the Facts is actually one of my favorite podcasts from Marvel Spider-Man. Even though he derails and criticizes Spider-Man's good ethics, Like, viewers who come on his show will defend Spider-Man for all the good deeds that he's done, and Jameson will always debunk them every single time. So Just the Facts is by far my favorite podcast, and the fact that he actually has a podcast in the MCU right now is actually pretty cool. So again, elements from Marvel's Spider-Man and some elements from Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales was in the movie too. So, and then I know in the remaster you can actually unlock the costumes from the movie, and you can pretty much play them in the remastered version of Marvel Spider-Man, because the scene, which we'll get to in a minute, the scene in which he fights Electro, he actually wears a modified version of the Iron Spider outfit. So it's pretty cool. Let's continue.
May's final line at Homecoming. What the But now a car horn censors out the word, and MJ is once again in her Joan of Arc shirt, but the three extras behind her are dressed exactly like the three guys behind MJ.
I caught that too. Joan of Arc shirt.
The major difference is that MJ now wears the broken black dahlia necklace that Peter bought her in Venice and gave to her in London.
Yep.
I actually like it better broken.
This necklace is the key to Peter and MJ's relationship, because in the final scene, despite her memory of Peter being erased, something compels her to keep wearing that.
That's what I was telling my friend Alan about the necklace, and he was actually surprised by that too, because subconsciously, even after all the memories were erased, she still keeps the necklace at the end of the movie, which symbolizes that somehow, some way, she wants to remember Peter subconsciously. So I think somehow in the future, in future Spider-Man movies, they'll probably bring them back together, because honestly, I think Kristen Dunst and Zendaya, they play a perfect roles of MJ respectively, because both of them actually bring the character MJ to life. So, and of course, Michelle Jones Watson, Mary Jane Watson, whatever MJs are that you like, I mean, both versions are great in my opinion. So, but let's continue.
Proof that she wasn't just with Peter because he was Spider-Man, and that she will wait forever for that I love you because she likes things better broken. Notice how one of the onlookers says, "Was it just a kid?" Just like one of the onlookers on the train says in Spider-Man 2.
Yeah,
when that
I
Peter
caught
got
that too.
unmasked. He's just a kid. Peter swings MJ through Times Square, where Jameson's inescapable broadcast includes an image of Peter's face half covered, as it often is in the Spider-Man comics, and it passed 2 billboards for Rogers the Musical, the Captain America musical from Hawkeye on Disney+.
Yeah, Rogers the Musical, that's my favorite, because of the fact that it's actually in the Hawkeye series too. So they're re-enditioning the play, which takes place in the real events from New York, where the Chintara was attacking the Avengers. So that was actually pretty hilarious. So, but yeah, and also too with Peter and Spider-Man's face with the half-faced, it's basically what appears every time when Peter's spider sense goes off. So when his spider sense goes off, you'll see Spider-Man's mask on his right side and Peter's full face on this side. So let's continue.
Peter lands MJ on the Queensboro Bridge, where they are spotted by passengers on the nearby Roosevelt Island tramway, famous from the 2002 Sam Raimi Spider-Man film, as the setting
Caught
of the
that
final
too.
battle where Green Goblin made Peter choose between Mary Jane or suffer the children. And then right after getting that Toby era reference,
And then Goblin was telling him, "We all have a right to choose. So choose." Then he drops the Roosevelt Island trailer, and Mary Jane and Spidey had to choose which one he's going to save. And then he ends up saying both of them too. So this was a callback from the first Spider-Man 2002. So
we get an Andrew Garfield era reference when Peter flips the manhole cover, recalling the very last time we saw Andrew Garfield
Caught that
on
too.
screen as Spider-Man. This is in front of
Amazing
Del
Spider-Man
Mar's
2,
Deli in
yup.
Queens, Peter's favorite spot that should have been
he grabs the sewer top and then swings past Rhino. Yep.
coming in a deleted scene Far From Home. But notice how it now reads Del Mar's 3, for this being the 3rd Tom Holland Spider-Man movie. Back in their apartment, Aunt May dumps Happy. Oh, but then
I
they
know.
walk in on MJ
Poor
and
Happy.
Peter declothed, calling back Aunt May walking in on Peter and Ned, just like this in Homecoming. But John
Yup.
Watts shoots all of this in a full 2-minute long take to heighten that awkwardness, and kudos to these 4 actors because the timing is so precise. Like when Peter fails to close the window shade the first time, He then flips it shut, which feels improvised, like Tom Holland screwed up closing it the first time, but then was just like, oh, Peter can flip it, and then they added in the VFX of the webbing after that. Also notice how Peter wears the same I survived my trip to NYC shirt that he wore at Homecoming as he came back home after Mr. Stark confiscated his suit. It's less baggy on him now because our little guy has grown up. The Daily Bugle broadcasts hammer away at Peter. You see a Daily News front page photoshopping mugshots using their yearbook photos and revealing MJ's name as Michelle Jones Watson.
Yeah. And I want to mention this too, and this is probably going to be off topic, but that mugshot with Peter, MJ, and Ned is kind of like reminds me of from the X-Men comics in the 80s. They would advertise these 3 or 4 kids that were referenced, and then they have a black and white poster, and on the label it says Mutie, and then the question will have on the tagline, do you know where your children are? It kind of reminds me of that, and I'll post that on my timeline as a reference in the future. So I know most of you will get it, but I'll definitely post it on my timeline for everybody to see. But I thought that was what it kind of like gave a callback to. So, but let's continue.
For the first time, adding the Watson like her counterpart Mary Jane Watson. Time magazine calls him Iron Man Jr.
Iron Man Jr.
In Touch Weekly calls him Two-Faced, and then Peter gets doused in green paint, while newsreel footage of Tower Bridge includes the ticker political turmoil continues in New Asgard. So I guess Valkyrie's rule over that colony in Tonsberg, Norway might be a bit unstable, something we could see more of in Thor Love and Thunder. Investigators recover the...
So the New Asgard that's going to be taking place in Thor Love and Thunder. I'm looking forward to seeing that too. Not to mention Beta Ray Bill showing up. That's going to be awesome too. So yeah. So I mean, obviously there's going to be like a tie-in between Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and Thor Love and Thunder. So they're all going to take place, but let's continue.
Drones from Far From Home linking them to Stark, giving investigators grounds to arrest Peter. The DODC returns, Department of Damage Control, who cleaned up Avenger messes in Homecoming, now led by Agent Cleary. Albert Cleary is the DODC comptroller in the comics.
Albert Cleary,
They take some evidence photos, showing a framed photo of Ned and MJ from the Homecoming dance. Interesting how Peter is not in that picture, though. Keep that in mind. We see Peter's Star Wars figurines. There's a photo taken of the Iron Spider charging station without the suit in it, though. And you see a rectangle of plugs into that one wall outlet. Also, we see the Edith glasses that Mysterio was trying to steal from him, and a bunch of PlayStation games because Sony. During the interrogation, Peter
you know, speaking of Sony, with also Tom Holland's going to play, he's actually going to be Uncharted where he plays Nathan Drake. And that's actually one of my favorite games is Uncharted. So, and you know what's interesting too? We got a Mario movie coming up soon. We got Sonic 2 that's coming out in the next few months. And then we actually have Detective Pikachu already in the Pokemon franchise. And then, yeah, with Nathan Drake coming out too and Uncharted. I mean, I would love to see a Crash Bandicoot live action movie too. And then not to mention too, I think eventually we're going to get a live action Smash Brothers movie. Now, that's going to be incredible. I would love to see that because I love Smash Brothers anyway. So, but let's continue.
The physics are theoretical, but the fun is real shirt that he wore in Spider-Man Homecoming when Tony Stark dropped him off back in Queens. Agent Cleary says Fury's been off planet for the past year. So Peter thought he was talking to Fury during Far From Home, but he was actually talking with the Skrull Talos. Also confirming that the DODC is more aware of Fury's movements than most Avengers are. Also that Agent Cleary just made my list of Skrull suspicious ahead of Secret Invasion.
And see, Secret Invasion, that's actually one of Marvel's infamous stories as well. I would say Secret Invasion is pretty much up there with Secret Wars too. But with Secret Invasions, in the comics, the Skrulls came to planet Earth and they were trying to frame the Avengers. So they would disguise themselves as heroes. So there's going to be a Secret Invasion live action coming up too, or a Secret Invasion adaptation from the comics. So yeah, and the Skrulls have been referenced many times. So yeah, but then you also have your good Skrulls who became like allies to the Avengers, and then you have your Rogues as well. So always have that as well. So, but I would love to see the Super Skrull. The Super Skrull who has the ability, the Fantastic Four's abilities. Now, since the Fantastic Four is coming out pretty soon too, whenever they get a chance to give up with the movie, I mean, Super Skrull will be pretty cool too. So, but more on that later. Let's continue.
Well, what do you know that? Stark Industries, the company itself, himself gets swept up in the investigation, so I guess Morgan Stark's gonna have to go to public school. The file
Right.
photo they use of Happy Hogan was his look from Iron Man 3 Prologue in 1999 when he had long hair and bolo tie like Vincent Vega in Pulp Fiction. And blowing our minds in the first 10 minutes, they get legal counsel from freaking Charlie Cox, Matt Murdock, Daredevil from the Netflix.
That was pretty cool too. Everybody actually marked out when they saw Charlie Cox reprising his role as Matt Murdock. I've seen all the Daredevil episodes too, and they're really cool. So seeing Matt pretty much trying to represent Peter Parker in the movie was actually pretty cool. And seeing the comics, Daredevil and Spider-Man teamed up so many times, so they're basically best friends. And their senses are pretty much almost similar, but not to an extent. So Daredevil has radar sense and Spider-Man has spider sense. So I thought it was pretty cool. But yeah, seeing Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock again was pretty cool, and everybody wanted it too. So
series, a crossover even crazier than Toby and Andrew in my book, because A, this is permanent in the MCU, and B, it presents wilder implications for the MCU, suggesting that much, if not all, of what we saw in the Netflix
the Kingpin
could now be MCU canon. And we just saw Cox's co-star Vincent D'Onofrio appearing as Kingpin in Hawkeye, and that finale episode will apparently give us some clarity on the exact canonicity of all those stories.
So the finale episode of Hawkeye, incredible. And I also want to say these two facts. Two of the best actors who portrayed Kingpin, Vincent D'Onofrio and Michael Clark Duncan. Those guys did a really great job of capturing the real life essence of the Kingpin. So, and here you have like basically a most powerful crime boss in the MCU, the world as a matter of fact. And on top of that, I mean, he's a philanthropist by day, a mafia crime lord by night. So those two actors epitomize the Kingpin. So let's continue.
But to be clear, this Matt Murdock is the superpowered Daredevil. A brick flies in through the window and he catches it with lightning-fast reflexes.
My favorite scene.
I love how Peter's hand was also ready to catch that brick too, since he has Spidey sense. Also, fun fact, Jon Favreau played Foggy Nelson in the 2003 Daredevil.
That he did.
Cool! So they have to move into Happy's condo, where he swiped Tony's dumb E-robot that we saw in the first Iron Man film, also recovered in Iron Man 3, and we saw Happy yelling at it in Homecoming. Now, first on the TV, there are some people complaining about the new changes to the Statue of Liberty, which I agree. Why wouldn't you add Cap Shield to it? Also, while they're in the condo, Happy watches Downtown
Cap Shield,
Abbey,
the Statue of Liberty.
Did in Iron Man 3 when he was in recovery, and by the door, he
Downtown Abbey.
Their security badges hanging. This was after he lectured everyone in Iron Man 3 that they have to have their one badge on them at all times. As Peter and MJ FaceTime, in MJ's room hangs her sketches of Peter with a rain cloud over his head, but also that one of Coach Wilson from Homecoming.
Yeah.
You don't even have detention.
Oh, I know. I just like coming here to sketch people in crisis.
There's also that same photo of her and Ned from Homecoming, again without Peter in it, and a photo of pigeons in Venice. And on the bed behind her, she is reading Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings.
My favorite poem by Maya Angelou. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings.
I got bit by that spider. I've only had 1 week where my life has felt normal.
This is actually only the second time in the MCU that Peter really referenced that bite after his chat with Ned in Homecoming.
You got bit by a spider? You didn't bite me? Well, it probably would have hurt, right? You know what? Whatever. Even if it did hurt, I'll let it bite. Maybe. How much did it hurt? The spider's dead, man.
Betty Brant hosts the Midtown Morning News still,
Betty
a job
Brant.
that she apparently also balances with being an intern for the Daily Bugle on TikTok. And she says, "Go get him, Tiger!" Mary Jane's catchphase for Peter in the comics and in the past films. Also, you can hear someone in the crowd yelling, "Do a flip!" Just like that guy in Homecoming, who also came back in Shang-Chi. The protester signs
Yeah, that same guy, he actually recorded the fight scene with Shang-Chi against the Mandarin thugs too, so that was actually pretty hilarious.
include several pro-Mysterio ones, one calling Peter Devil in Disguise. So this movie's premise is loosely based on the Spider-Man One More Day comic, in which Peter goes to Doctor Strange in search of a spell to make everyone forget that he's Spider-Man, but ends up having to turn to a little girl who is revealed as Mythic.
Yeah, I was telling my friends about that too, how there was a lot of One More Day references in that scene because Peter did the exact same thing in the comics where he went to Doctor Strange to ask Strange to erase people's memories of Peter being Spider-Man. So there was a lot of One More Day references too. So yeah, I saw that too.
So, to do this instead, it actually ends with a similar reset as this film, in which Peter's identity is a secret once more, but at the cost of his relationships with MJ and with his friend. It was a very controversial comic when it came out, but like many great MCU movies, it turned a pretty divisive comic storyline into a really great work of cinema.
Yeah, and for some reason, nobody ever rocked that storyline. I think it was because of the fact that Joe Quesada, who actually wrote it, wanted Peter to be single again. And I remember Sal was talking about that with Tiffany's, Ethan, and Ben about that on the Comic Pox YouTube channel, and how it was like so controversial at the time because like nobody wanted that to happen. So I thought it was actually interesting and hilarious at the same time. So.
In the crowd, there's also an MJ supporter. This is a cameo by Darnell Aplin, an actor and Zendaya's real-life assistant. Flash has published a tell-all book called Flashpoint, which is probably a nod to the DC Comics preceding timeline crossover event, with Barry Allen meeting alternate versions himself, and of Batman, which is being adapted.
There's been many Flashpoint references in the CW's Flash TV series too, and there's going to be a live-action Flashpoint movie coming out pretty soon. But Barry Allen goes back in time. He meets Thomas Wayne, who is Bruce Wayne's father. In that version, Thomas becomes Batman, and then Bruce is dead, unfortunately. And Martha Wayne becomes the Joker. So it's kind of interesting at the same time, and it's pretty crazy. So let's continue.
Into another cross-franchise event with The Flash in 2022. The school's mural of great inventors throughout history that showed Howard Stark in Homecoming has also now added the faces of Abraham Erskine.
Yep, all the background scientists. Yeah, on the wall paper at Midtown High with Peter, behind the background of Peter, you have Albert Einstein, Albert Erskine, and then Howard Stark. Several of the scientists are in the background too. So,
as well as Hank Pym in the upper
Hank
right
Pym.
corner. Coach Wilson, Mr. Dell, and Mr. Harrington greet Peter with a display case of Peter's academic decathlon awards in his blazer. There's also a photo of Peter and MJ in Venice, where it looks like Mr. Harrington might have pasted himself in from one of his selfies that he took then. Later on the rooftop, MJ reads a New York Post. That is the salacious tabloid that they actually based the earlier Daily Bugle designs on, reading Peter Parker and his spider minions, showing Peter puppeting Ned and MJ. Below reading, his hypnotic spider senses seduced Jones Watson. Male spiders actually do release hypnosis-like pheromones.
That's
and
true.
Ironically, Peter does allow MJ and Ned to be...
Which explains Spider-Woman's ability too, because she releases pheromones as well. Get to that later.
brainwashed, but to forget about him. Peter rolls over to kiss her, and the textbook that he rests his head on was chemistry.
Chemistry.
I see what you did there. That was noticed, but we'll read it. Also, written in graffiti on the background is Ditko, a reference to Spider-Man co-creator Steve Ditko.
That was a great callback and tribute to Steve Ditko, who was also one of the creators for Spider-Man, along with Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. So you really can't miss it because it was in the background behind MJ and Peter.
Peter gets rejected from college after college. Dumb E gradually reassembles Peter's Death Star until the MIT one comes in and Dummy just breaks it, just like Ned did. And all three of the friends get rejected, which is a bummer because MIT is Tony Stark's alma mater, where he handed out scholarships in Civil War, and where future Ironheart Riri Williams goes to school.
Yep. See, Riri Williams goes to MIT, and she's going to become the next Ironheart. So she's going to follow in the footsteps of Iron Man. So, but yeah, it was a bummer that Peter, Ned, and MJ were rejected by MIT, and that was their dream school, considering the fact that Tony, who was his former mentor, is an alma mater at MIT. So,
which Streamlights actually have little goatees, making them little Doctor Stranges, giving Peter the idea of what Avenger to return to, and we hear the notes of Doctor Strange's theme here that leads Peter to 1778 Bleecker Street, the Sanctum Sanctorum. Inside
and of course, with copyright infringements, I don't want to play the music and everything, but yeah, the music of the Sanctum Sanctorum does play in the background of No Way Home too, so that's actually one of my favorite headquarters from Doctor Strange too, so I love his hideout and everything. So
Apprentices is played by Emily Fong, who worked production on Infinity War Endgame, Shang-Chi, and Black Widow. Wong arrives and explains how one of the Rotunda gateways opened to Siberia and let a blizzard in. We saw those gateways in the 2016 film. I will say, the production of this movie went to an insane amount of effort to freeze over the sanctum for just a, let the door open to Siberia gag. I'm wondering, with those floodwaters pouring into the sanctum in the Multiverse of Madness teaser, this may be a bigger indicator of this reality destabilizing. Strange floats runs in wearing a Columbia University hoodie. Columbia is his alma mater. We see another one of his hoodies floating by the laundry machines downstairs. And he's carrying a mug reading, "Oh, for fuck's sake." We learn that Wong actually holds the rank of Sorcerer Supreme since Strange blipped for 5 years. Since WandaVision told us that Scarlet Witch's powers surpass those of the Sorcerer Supreme, that might mean Strange might be even lower on that sorcerer hierarchy than we thought and might need her help even more.
Yeah, so considering the fact that since Strange has been gone for 5 years after the blip, if it wasn't for that, he would have already been Sorcerer Supreme. So he's pretty much in the between Wong and Wanda at the same time. After the events of WandaVision, and now she's going to have a major role to play in Multiverse of Madness, it's going to be interesting to see where Strange's powers is going to be like by the time it happens. So, but of course, in the comics, Strange is already a Sorcerer Supreme and one of the most powerful sorcerers. So, but chances are his character is going to be even more developed as Multiverse of Madness continues in the MCU and as Strange's character continues too. So.
Strange says that Peter's request to reverse time is selfish, plus the time stone was atomized. But Peter says, quote, "It's not about me. I mean, this is really hurting a lot of people." In doing so, Peter uses the same words that the Ancient One used in her crucial lesson to Strange.
It's not about you.
And so, Strange agrees to help him, using a spell called the Runes of Kafkal. Not sure the spelling, but Kafkal isn't from any of the comics that I know of, but what Wong says, the memory-wiping spell travels the dark border between known and unknown realities, suggesting that to enact this spell, you have to kind of bridge with other realities of the multiverse. And he leads them through a portal. You can see that bell tower in the background. That's actually in the Camartage courtyard. Strange explains how the Sanctum is built at an intersection of cosmic energy currents, that they weren't the first to seek this out, with walls thousands of years old, and that they shot an episode of The Equalizer there in the 80s. The spell goes crazy, and Peter shouts.
And honestly, I've never seen The Equalizer, and that's kind of like I wouldn't call it like a nosebleed, but that's kind of like went over my nose on that one. But I've never seen The Equalizer, and since that was actually referenced, I gotta go back and watch it. So it's actually one of my to-do lists to check out. But I thought it was a pretty cool known fact that The Equalizer was shot right at the bottom of the Sanctum Sanctorum, so that was actually pretty cool.
Basically, everyone who knew that I was Spider-Man before should still know that is the rule by which characters get warped into this reality, also suggesting that Kirsten Dunst, Mary Jane, both Harry Osborn, several others might have also been briefly walking around in the MCU, but also tells us that Venom, through his multiversal symbiote hive mind, must have known that Peter is Spider-Man, though I didn't know when Electro found out that Peter was Spider-Man, unless there's some kind of Spider-Man Mandela effect that I'm suffering from.
See, and I was confused by that too, because I had no idea Electro even knew that Spider-Man and Peter Parker were one and the same. He didn't find out in Amazing Spider-Man 2, so he only found out until after the end events of No Way Home. So, yeah, I'm kind of confused. Like Erik, I'm kind of confused by that too. So it could have been a Spider-Man Mandela effect that I had no idea too, though. So let's continue.
It's possible. As this purple void surrounds them, Strange sees a glowing silhouette that looks like the glowing arms of Doc Ock, him being one of the characters that are currently spilling.
Yeah, we caught that.
So Strange has to encase this spell in a prism, similar to how Strange in What If encases Killmonger, Infinity, and Zola Ultron in a prism to contain that reality rupturing chaos. But this prism is a dodecahedron, which is made up of pentagons with 5 sides and 5 corners, because Peter changed his spell 5 times. Strange thought it was 6, but if you listen back, Peter changed it for MJ, for Ned, for Aunt May, for Happy, and then for everyone who knew. That's 5. So what was the 6th? Well, the 6th may have been a secret change by Doctor Strange so that he would still remember Peter because he loves him.
I wonder, that's a good thing too, but I wonder too, and this is probably more of a joke, but I was wondering if this 6 referencing to the Sinister Six. So that could have been another thing too, but let's continue.
At least that's my opinion. Peter suits up in the Iron Spider armor.
The Iron Spider armor with the wings, just like in the comics too.
Edith offline. Also, the voice has changed to male, and that's because the DODC has confiscated and disabled all the drone network. It's interesting that they did not take this Iron Spider suit too, but again, when they raided his place, that suit was not charging in the port. So I don't know, maybe Peter tried to flush the nanotech down the toilet. Now, on this bridge, there are a ton of license plates, and I can tell you folks, I looked at all of them, because John Watts loves to hide Easter eggs in his license plates. The only ones I could actually decode to mean anything were a Nissan with SEYS1DP.
Yeah.
And earlier, there was an anagram book on Peter's shelf.
Anagram book, yeah.
Rearranges to
Spidey's.
plural, which could be a clue for multiple multiple Spideys being in this movie. And of course, the MIT woman's car is 63A5M3 or 63ASM3 for 1963
Amazing Spider-Man issue, yeah, 93,
the comic debut of Dr. Octopus, who arrives in the scene, played once more by Alfred Molina from the 2004 Spider-Man 2. He looks awesome. Composer Michael Giacchino samples Danny Elfman's Doc Ock theme from that film, and as his claws smash through this bridge, note that the claws...
I will say this, there's a lot of theme music that you can hear in the background from the previous Spider-Man movies too, so watch out for those. They're awesome.
Red, which in that 2004 film was how we knew when the claws were controlling Otto's brain. So this must have happened before Peter converted him, at which point the lights flickered back white. Doc Ock brings up his machine here, his fusion device that he was working on in the movie.
What have you done with my machine?
And he quotes his line from the 2004 film, his whole goal.
The power of the sun in the palm of my hand.
Now, at one point, you'll notice Peter webs one of the claws to a car door to make it harder for Doc Ock to grab anything else to throw at him. Doc Ock pries off some of Peter's nanotech, which then absorbs onto his arms. So if you remember back to the first Raimi film, Norman Osborn was an expert on nanotech.
I'm something of a scientist myself.
Yep.
I read all your research on nanotechnology. Really brilliant.
And in the sequel, Octavius built his arms using Oscorp tech.
I'd like to thank Harry Osborn and Oscorp Industries for providing it.
And he explained how he controls these arms using a neural link.
These smart arms are controlled by my brain through a neural link. Nanowires feed directly into my cerebellum.
And since the Stark nanotech is controlled neurally as well, that would allow Doc Ock's tech to be compatible with it. However, that link goes both ways, so Peter is able to pair with the arms and control the arms remotely. And then Otto snaps at his arms saying, "Listen to me," calling back what he said at the end of the 2004 film.
Listen to me now.
Then Green Goblin swoops in, but Dr. Strange
epic.
portals them back to the crypt where the lizard is already contained. Doc Ock asks Strange if this is a birthday party, just like Tony Stark referenced Dr. Strange's
yeah, that was funny.
when they first met.
What is your job exactly besides making balloon animals?
Peter
the Jimmy Fallon reference, that was funny.
Dr. Strange,
How did you know you were made of magic? Because my Nana says that we have it in our family, and sometimes I get these tinglings in my hands.
The doctor, physician.
and later, Nana's home has a display of ancient blades, and Ned successfully operates the sling ring, which surprises Strange. So yes, it really does seem like Ned might have a future as a sorcerer in the MCU.
Or he could have a future as a hobgoblin too, so that's gonna be pretty crazy. And you know, in the comics, Jason McIndale became the Hobgoblin, or the second Hobgoblin, and Ned leaves, and man, I'm going to have to get into a whole debunk Easter. Basically, I have to debunk the whole thing with the Hobgoblin theory, because originally Ned Leeds in the comics, he was supposed to be the Hobgoblin, but I'm going to do that for another video as far as like the comics is concerned, because like the whole identity of the Hobgoblin was so screwy in the first place is that it's just crazy. But I'll say it like this, Jason McIndale became the Hobgoblin, but then during the Inferno saga, where an artist and some of the demons came from the underworld and tried to attack the Earth, one of the demons possessed Hobgoblin and ended up becoming Demogoblin, and he became a sorcerer at the same time. So I'm thinking somehow, considering that now that Ned's a sorceress or a sorcerer, we could get a chance we might see Hobgoblin or a version of a Hobgoblin in the MCU. So let's continue.
Down in the Undercroft, there's all kinds of creepy goodies. A doll turns its head at them. In the fridge are a bunch of creatures, a floating eyeball in a jar, a claw creeping out from under foil. MJ finds a goatee guard that Strange must use to get his goatee perfectly shaped. Yep. And then MJ goes on TikTok to find people on homemade gliders replicating Green Goblin. Another with a frost giant cosplay that reads, "I am the Green Elf." And then at the end of this, they're finally able to track down Electro, where Peter also finds Sandman battling Electro with his suit turned inside out.
Thomas Hayden Church did a really great job, and also too, he actually recorded in some of the scenes too. I've read about it, and then one of my friends told me about it too. Shout out to my friend Dan. He was telling me about that too. So I read about the fact that he actually recorded the scenes because he wasn't available to show up to play these actual scenes. But you wouldn't even notice, you know, if you didn't notice the background. So let's continue.
Sandman helps Peter because they were on good terms at the end of the 2007 film, but Electro Jamie Foxx now has a new body looking a bit cooler. And while Dr. Connors later calls it out since they didn't know each other while they worked at Oscorp in the same continuity, this new body is never really explained in the movie. Meanwhile, Willem Dafoe, Norman Osborn, my favorite actor in this movie, argues with his goblin helmet, just as he would in the 2002 film, but the argument ends with him shattering the helmet, but even after it shatters, the goblin voice laughs, meaning breaking that helmet did not destroy the identity, it just fused it into Norman's soul. Notice the framing of this broken mask as Norman walks away matches the framing of Tobey Maguire Peter leaving his suit behind in the garbage can.
Which is a callback to one of Spider-Man issues when Peter wasn't going to be Spider-Man anymore, and he was facing Kingpin at the time. And it was actually one of Kingpin's earlier appearances too, but Peter wasn't going to be Spider-Man anymore, which was the tagline, Spider-Man no more. So, yeah, let's continue.
And in the 2004 film, but in both cases, the characters get dragged back into the game. You know, as I am looking for all these details, I like to keep my snack game going, but I'm tired of the same old snacks, which is why I have turned to Boxu. Boxu is a monthly subscription service that delivers premium Japanese snacks and tea pairings straight from Japan.
While he's doing that, I was actually going to pull up the issue real quick of Spider-Man No Way Home. Well, Spider-Man, the issue where he drops his costume.
Old family snack makers for genuine and authentic selections. The first box that you get is called Seasons of Japan, and it lets you taste the seasonal flavors that are popular in Japan. This month, we got fancy and upgraded to this limited edition handcrafted Kiribako wooden box. Let's see what's inside. So cool.
Yep, so Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1. That was when he was going to drop the costume and no longer be Spider-Man. So I got it right here. So yeah, this is the issue right there. Yep, Spider-Man.
You honestly don't find anything quite like this.
I gotta get this issue too, but of course I got the comic code in there too. But yeah, this is when Peter was going to drop the Spider-Man costume and live a normal life. So yeah, there's an ad too. So, but yeah, it's a lot of issues and a lot of references from the past movies and the comics too. So you wouldn't know it unless you pretty much read the comics or caught the clues there too. So, yep. So that.
There's all kinds of stuff in here, like little chocolate snacks, little puff things.
But man, I love Easter eggs. I just love finding clues in general. So,
yeah. Where they come from, and each month features new curations centered around a theme. I am lucky to have traveled to Japan in the past, but if you have someone in your life who longs to travel but might not be able to,
Japan is awesome.
This is an awesome gift idea. It's also just a great.
Yeah, because like one of my coworkers, my former coworkers, used to went to Japan. He actually enjoyed it too. So.
Is having a giveaway. Everyone who subscribes before December 31st,
my friend Corey, he actually went to Japan, so it was actually pretty sweet. So, that's one country I haven't been to yet, but I'm going to though. So, love Japan. It's awesome.
Rockstars to get $20 off your subscription.
But of course, I love countries in general, so you know.
That's the homeless center where Peter works in the comics and the games. Someone tagged the sign outside with "Mysterio was right" and a green circle over Peter's head.
Yeah, and then Feast was also in the comics and in the video game too, because Feast was an organization created by Aunt May to help the homeless. So yeah, and it was actually one of the organizations too. So yeah.
Fishbowl helmet. Inside, Norman plays a convincing, mentally disturbed man saying, "Someone's at my house. Oscorp doesn't exist. My son." And he trails off, referring to Harry Osborn, of course, but also telling us that Oscorp, at least any company named that, is not currently in the MCU anywhere. Notice how he wears a green coat over those purple sweats. Goblin's colors.
Yep, Goblin's colors.
Costume is worth looking at. She was wearing a blue jumper with a red sash. That could be foreshadowing the bloody wound that causes her death. And May tells Peter to help Norman. Peter says this isn't my problem, which she gets mad at him over because it recalls Tobey Maguire Peter's fateful decision not to intervene, which led to Uncle Ben's death.
I missed the part where that's my problem.
I caught that too, because when Peter said that, I was like, oh, this is going back to Spider-Man 1 when Peter actually let the burglar go away, and boy, was he going to regret that. But he told the guy who was managing the run, he was actually telling the wrestling promoter, I missed the part where that's my problem. So yeah, I hate to say it, but that was going to come back to bite him tragically, because the same burglar that robbed the wrestling promoter was going to be the same burglar that took out his Uncle Ben. And boy, so many lessons learned in that one. So,
J. Jonah Jameson's upgraded Daily Bugle show, which is really thanks to his Spider-Man coverage, now pushes supplements, which is another jab at Alex Jones. The Chiron reads, Spider-Man National Monuments.
I caught that too. You know what? Jameson actually does remind me of Alex Jones. I'm sure most of you know who he is. He's the one that actually does a lot of conspiracy theories videos. And on top of that, he appeared on Joe Rogan's podcast several times too, the JRE, Joe Rogan Experience. And that dude is insane, man. He's hilariously insane, though. But yeah, Jameson kind of reminds me of Alex Jones just a bit. So yeah, I mean, they're both like bombastic and comes with all kinds of theories and stuff like that. So yeah, they both remind me. He reminds me of Alex Jones. So.
Calling the Washington Monument and Homecoming and Tower Bridge and Far From Home. Meanwhile, Otto Octavius recalls the moment he warped, saying he had Spider-Man by the throat, so this must have happened right before Tobey changed him in this moment in the film.
Mm-hmm.
These things have turned you into something you're not. Don't listen to them.
It was my dream.
Sometimes, to do what's right, we have to be steady and give up the thing we want the most, even our dreams.
You're right.
Meanwhile, Max talks about being absorbed into the grid, about to turn into pure energy, recalling the Amazing Spider-Man 2 when Peter and Gwen hardwired Electro to that grid and overloaded his chip. And then Lizard asks Max if he dies, but he never gets an answer, and that's because Lizard doesn't actually die in the 2012 film. He ends up locked up and approached to join a future Sinister Six. So Strange shows them the box, the Machina Dichotomus, in Latin roughly the division machine, which he used to send them back to their universes. But Peter and Strange debate over this. Strange says, in the grand calculus of the multiverse, their sacrifice means infinitely more than their lives. The subtext, of course, being his guilt for sacrificing Tony Stark as part of his complex calculus from seeing 14,605 future outcomes to defeat Thanos. If you think about it, calculus was also the type of arithmetic on He Who Remains chalkboard.
Yeah.
I just find it interesting that Peter overcomes Strange.
I caught that too with the calculus formations
it's
too.
Still super nerdy, just not overthinking it, doing as much 4D chess as those guys are. So Peter snatches the box and Strange pursues them, trapping him between portals so that he whips his own foot. I love it. But then he brings Peter back to push his astral soul from his physical body, similar to how the Ancient One did to him. However,
not a Strange reference.
Soulless physical body still manages to evade Strange. Interesting. This must be a higher form of the Spidey sense, which would be a neurological reflex that is divorced from Peter's conscious mind.
Yeah,
but also
that would make
shows us how
sense.
this is really linked to a kind of metaphysical magic. And later in the movie, Andrew Garfield Peter does say magic's real here too, so he might be aware of that link as well. Strange sends the Cloak of Levitation after Peter, giving us that what if Spider-Man became the Sorcerer Supreme image from the comics that we also saw in the zombie episode of What If.
Yeah, see, I thought that was actually pretty cool that there was a reference to the comics when Spider-Man actually wears the Cloak of Levitation and how he actually wears it in the What If episode too.
I love this detail. On a nearby newsstand are People magazines with Liz Allen, Peter's crush from Spider-Man Homecoming, daughter to
Liz Allen.
Vulture, calling Peter a liar, showing us that that family, including Vulture, is still somewhere in the multiverse.
Yeah.
Gonna show up in Morbius. Don't know how that's gonna make sense. Strange attraction.
Yeah, I'm curious how that's going to work out too, with the fact that Adrian Toomes was being arrested and then Morbius was there too, so which means you got to check out Morbius when it comes out. So I know I will, because it's all going to be tied in together, man. So.
In the mirror dimension, the VFX are incredible. Peter tumbles past the High Line in New York City, which Kate Bishop actually just recommended to Yelena and Hawkeye. He tumbles through a department store where he
Kate Bishop talked about that with Elena and Hawkeye too, so that was actually a pretty cool reference.
hear Christmas music playing. Peter tumbles toward the Bethesda fountain in Central Park. Actually looks
By
like
the way,
water
with Peter actually going through the Bethesda rain in that scene, it was actually a callback to Miles Morales when he was tackling with Rhino and Spider-Man Miles Morales video game. It was similar to that too. So yeah, it was a good callback.
Statue might have, like the Statue of Liberty, been swapped out for an Avenger. Strange traps Peter in an endless loop of portals, creating the illusion of infinite Spider-Men, as there are. And then Peter recognizes from the Archimedean spiral that he can geometry the shit out of this and trap Strange in a web of
Archimedean
math.
spiral.
If you want a way to really celebrate this awesome magic versus math moment, you gotta get your hands on our exclusive Strange Entanglement shirt.
That's why I'm gonna get the shirt, Strange Entanglement. There's a lot of math in there too, so it's pretty cool.
Of a scientist myself. Of course, his line from the 2002 movie.
You know,
I'm something of a scientist myself.
Peter and Ned do their recurring handshake, and it ends with the sling ring sparking a bit. A little sign that Ned does have a kind of inner magic to him. Peter takes them to Happy's condo. The security feed glitches as Electro passes from its interference, and then Otto snaps, "I don't need fixing, especially by some teenager using scraps in a bachelor's junk drawer." It's not a drawer full of scraps. It's a box of scraps.
that was a good callback to Obadiah Stane when he was telling one of the scientists that, you know, he built this thing from a bunch of scraps. So yeah, and one of the scientists was actually in Far From Home too, who was actually one of the co-conspirators with Quentin Beck. So I thought that was a good callback with that one too. So.
The walls of Happy's room, you
Jeff Bridges killed it as Obadiah Stane too, so.
can actually see the name Slott. That's a reference to longtime Spider-Man writer Dan Slott. Peter activates
Dan
the Stark
Slott,
Jet Fabricator. We saw this kind of device used on the Stark Jet to design his new suit in Far From Home. It's powered by an arc reactor. This is a familiar design. This is the new element arc reactor Mark I with the triangular inlay.
Mark I is the arc reactor,
yep. New element he rediscovered in Iron Man 2. I love that this is the era of arc reactor he used, because in Spider-Man Homecoming, they specifically had the Mark 42 armor that was using that same generation of arc reactor from Iron Man 3 on the Stark Jet.
See, this is why I love the Iron Man armors. There's always been one of my favorites too. There's probably at least more Iron Manual comics, but I got the one in my closet with the Iron Manuals. So it details how Tony Stark's armors operate. So it's like a lot of calculus and chemistry in that too. Me being a math guy myself, that's one of the reasons why I got the book. But I've always loved Iron Man armors. They're always really cool and techy at the same time too. So they're awesome.
That would be the one that Happy still has in his possession. Meanwhile, Otto and May share some water in the kitchen. They did briefly date in the comics. Then
they
Peter
did.
Designs a new inhibitor trip for
Doc Ock and May dated. So
fried in the 2004 film, and he puts in place these 6 needles that go into Otto's skin and fuse with the spinal cord. I love how they use the same exact production design from the Raimi films for all of these pieces of technology. They really clearly did their homework to look at how all of these things function. At this point, the red lights on Doc Ock's claws flicker back to bluish white, and he transfers the nanotech back to Peter to give him this golden spider, 8 arms, just like his own. It's like giving him a badge of honor.
Badge of honor.
Otto encourages his buddy Norman that he's about to rid himself of his darker half. Norman, facing away from him, says, "Just me." And Defoe uses his darker goblin voice in this moment, meaning it is only goblin in his mind right now. And so Peter's spidey sense kicks in, and he just kind of wanders around the condo.
Osborn was in the background too.
As it begins, the first person to appear in his periphery is Norman Osborn. And the first thing Peter says is, "May." It's his instinct telling him that Norman will pose a fatal threat
to him and Aunt May. Yep. And second time I watched that pretty much just blew my mind, and I knew it was going to happen too, because it was going to be a cross between, you know, Peter, May, and Osborn. So, and Osborn was in the background when Peter's spider sense kicked in. So yeah, it's crazy. Let's see.
May. And so Peter whips Norman to dummy, which, as they came into the condo, you can see Norman in the background casing. So Goblin makes his case to the other villains. These are not curses, these are gifts. Recalling the final lines of the 2002 film, the lesson that Tobey Maguire Peter learned.
This is my gift. My curse.
When Peter had to rationalize his powers as both a gift and a curse, the fight breaks out. Peter punches Goblin, and Goblin just smiles more and more. He is loving it. Combat is just so brutal. Apparently, Willem Dafoe insisted on doing as many stunts as he could himself.
That's what he said. And on top of that, William even said that he wasn't going to come back to the film unless he does his own stunts. And I know they pretty much want him to do that anyway. So I'm glad he came back, because he's one of my favorite actors who can do a really good job portraying Norman Osborn, the character himself. So, and then on top of that, his character design is pretty much similar to Marvel Spider-Man too, with the red hair and everything. And I think when they were doing the character design for Marvel Spider-Man and Spider-Man Miles Morales, they wanted to give him the Willem Dafoe look anyway. So I thought it was actually pretty cool.
Downstairs, Goblin's glider strikes May, and now that creepy face is covered in a Hobgoblin-style hood, and he tosses a pumpkin bomb, which Peter bats away, showing how this guy...
Well, considering the fact that Hobgoblin's costume and his tech gear is kind of similar to Norman Osborn's anyway, because of the fact that they were made by the same guy and the same company too. So when Hobgoblin's identity was a mystery at the time, he actually confiscated Oscorp's blueprints So he was able to find the glider and the pumpkin bombs in the blueprint, and was able to create his own variant costume of the Green Goblin, which in turn turned into Hobgoblin. So, I mean, he talked about that in Spider-Man the Animated Series too, so.
Is just as willing to bomb an Aunt May as he was in the 2002 film. And as she dies, May says the immortal words of Uncle Ben: with great power, there must also come great responsibility. Yeah, there was a slight rewording, and that's because she said the original comic wording of the line that includes "there must also come" directly from Stan Lee.
Yeah,
that hit hard. So
that totally hit hard for me too. We said the exact same quote from "with great power comes great responsibility." That hit hard for me too, man. But if you think about it, it actually came from a Bible verse too, which says that too much was given, much is required. So it's the same thing with great power comes great responsibility. So what you put in, there's going to be great responsibility towards your actions and towards your work. So hard work pays off, so.
The portal to one of the other Peter Parkers currently in this universe, Spider-Man Andrew Garfield, a guy no one will ever believe again in interviews.
Nope.
The music in this moment is actually James Horner's Young Peter theme from the Amazing Spider-Man film in 2012. And we just gotta pause and appreciate how great the Andrew Garfield era of the Spider-Man suit was.
I loved it. His era of Spider-Man was great.
Shade of blue, huge eyes, and a true DIY practicality to it. One thing that era nailed. But then Ned portals again, and Tobey Maguire Peter Parker steps in. His entrance set to Danny Elfman's Spider-Man theme. And we gotta credit both Maguire and Garfield for so deftly slipping back into their mannerisms. Tobey is preemptively polite and dopey. Andrew is post-mistake apologetic and super chatty. And I also like how their first instinct upon seeing each other is to whip attack, as if the last time
that was awesome.
Guys encountered a doppelganger, it might have been a hostile situation. Tobey Peter says that he liked to hang out atop the Chrysler building, as we saw his Peter perch in the Raimi films. Andrew Peter says he liked the Empire State Building for the view, but they find Peter on the rooftop of his school in Queens. It's not about the view, it's about a refuge from his high school life, because he never moved into the city. Andrew Peter starts to say he has some understanding of losing someone, of course referring to letting Gwen Stacy die, and he goes on to describe what happened after Gwen's death, how he stopped pulling his punches and got rageful and bitter. So apparently in that Garfield continuity, this Spider-Man might have straight up killed people, which is an insane revelation. I'm gonna explore all that in another video. But Tobey Peter recounts the vengeance that he felt that led him to track down Uncle Ben's murderer, and how in Spider-Man 3 that wound was reopened with Flint Marko and exacerbated by Venom, a critical lesson that he had to learn. And all three recognize the words with great...
And I'll say this too, like this is actually a good conversation too, because it goes back even in real life that when you get back at people, it doesn't make you feel good at all, because what were you trying to prove? What's it going to prove? It doesn't prove anything, because you're only hurting yourself in the end. So getting revenge is not going to help you out at all. The best way to move forward in life is to just keep going and pressing on. No matter how many times you've been hurt or someone tries to hurt you, the best medicine is to go move on, because if you try to hurt somebody, you're only going to hurt yourself in the end. So that's my 2 cents on my motivation talk for the day. So let's continue.
Power comes great responsibility, making that proverb a kind of constant absolute point among all the Spider-Men. They return to the high school and work together to engineer cures for all of them. I love how nerdy the second half of this movie is. Tobey Peter tells Ned that his best friend died in his arms after trying to kill him, referring to Harry Osborn in Spider-Man 3.
Spider-Man 3, yep. In Spider-Man 3, Harry tried to kill Peter at first, but then he redeems himself and ends up, losing his life against Venom, or Peter 3's Venom in the movie in Spider-Man 3. So it's pretty cool. Oh, I thought it was actually interesting the way they actually named the names of Peters 1, 2, and 3. Because if you think about it, it kind of goes back to their sequels too. So I wanted to call that out in that one too. But yeah, Harry's relationship with Peter is actually similar to what the relationship was like in the comics, because Harry did take up the mantle of being the Green Goblin, but Harry eventually became a good guy and tried to save Peter and sacrifice his life for Peter. So Spider-Man 3 gets some elements from the comics like that too. So
while Tobey Peter tells Andrew Peter that he and Mary Jane eventually made it work, Ned calls her Peter, and all three of them look up, confusedly pointing at each other. Of course, a nod to the meme. awesome.
Yeah, to the meme when they're pointing at each other. It was actually the end credits from Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Because you had the 1960s Spider-Man pointing at each other, Spider-Man, and then you had Spider-Man 2099 showing up, pointing at the other Spider-Man. So that was a really good callback too. So
Peter shows how his webbing, unlike the others who use mechanical web shooters, comes freakishly out of his wrists. I love how Andrew plays super grossed out, and even when Tom Holland moves the conversation along, he even continues staring at Toby's wrist for a beat before he's like, oh, okay, yeah, what? And then on to the showdown at the Statue of Liberty. Toby Peter's back tenses up, a callback to Peter hurting his back.
hurting his back in Spider-Man 2. My back! My back! Yep. That was basically just a cool callback for that too. So I thought it was hilarious. I was like, oh, there he goes, having his back issues. I was telling Alan and my friends about that. I was like, oh, there he goes, having his back issues.
Was an inside joke about how Toby nearly sit out of the sequel after hurting his back on Seabiscuit, and then Andrew cracks it for him for once cracking someone's backbone without killing them. Toby talks about how he fought an alien made out of black goo, of course referring to Venom, his Eddie Brock played by Topher Grace, and setting up Tom Hardy Venom's arrival in the post-credit scene. And then Tom Holland Peter talks about how he fought Thanos, and then Andrew's like, oh, I'm lame, I only fought a Russian guy in a rhinoceros suit, of course referring to Paul Giamatti's Rhino. But I love it. Toby Peter talks about saying he's actually amazing. And Andrew Garfield the credit he deserves. Despite his amazing Spider-Man era, often ranked the lowest by fans, he's still amazing, and now he's got...
Andrew Garfield's my guy. I don't care what anybody says. That guy is top-notch, one of my favorite actors. I've met a lot of celebrities over the years, and Andrew's one of my top guys to meet next. I mean, he played Peter Parker really well. I mean, I thought it was cool when he appeared in Spider-Man and Amazing Spider-Man in the first one. So I thought it was actually cool. So he's amazing. No, I mean, pun intended. He's really great. I mean, I can't really explain his character and the fact that he's a great guy in real life too. So I mean, how can people actually hate Andrew Garfield Spider-Man? I mean, honestly, and I was gonna say this for the end of the video, all three actors did a really great job portraying their perspective Spider-Man, because it gives out what the character is like in the comics anyway. He's a cross between nerdy, between charismatic, and he's also talkative, and he's also a fusion of all of those things. So yeah, I mean, Peter Parker is a combination of an everyman. He's me, he's you. That's pretty much what he's all about. So, you know, it's how you overcome your obstacles, how you grow by challenging up for more of your responsibilities and everything. So, but yeah, let's continue.
His brothers. But I love how the first time these Peters try to work together, it totally fails, since they are more used to being solo acts.
Yep.
So, while Andrew and Toby teach Tom how to mourn and to forgive, Tom teaches them the one thing his era of Spider-Man had that
Teamwork.
theirs didn't: cooperation with superheroes more powerful than he is. At one point, Toby just straight up screams, "How is this helping?" And Andrew Peter asks if the Avengers are a band, and calling back when Bruce Banner asks if the Avengers broke up like the Beatles.
The Avengers broke up. We're toast.
Like a band? Like the Beatles?
But they're able to figure it out, and a little subtle detail here that I loved. During their heroic swing, Tom Holland Peter whips to his two brothers to sling them back up with him.
Oh, that was cool.
The three of them can leap together off the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah, I thought that was
Electro
awesome.
And Sandman and Lizard. Meanwhile, you see how Electro's bolts at one point fire up in a star shape around his head, like Electro's mask in the comics. Toby Peter manages to revert Thomas Hayden's Church Flint Marco. I love how that device lights up and spins the same way the Super Collider did in Spider-Man 3. Then Lizard jumps into the portal with Ned and MJ, thrashing around that science lab, evoking that school battle in the 2012 film.
School battle, yeah, that was awesome.
Electro, and they hit Lizard with the same serum gas that they used as the reigning antidote at the end of the 2012 movie, reverting him to Rhys Ifans' Dr. Connors. And Max Dillon tells Andrew Garfield Peter that he thought he was going to be black, and that there's got to be a black Spider-Man somewhere out there, definitely setting up Miles Morales to step up sometime soon, hopefully.
Yeah.
We do know from Aaron Davis's lines in Homecoming that Miles Morales does exist in the MCU.
Yeah, because the fact of the matter is Aaron Davis shows up in Spider-Man Homecoming. He mentioned Miles several times too. So there's going to be a Miles Morales movie down the road. I'm looking forward to seeing that. Of course, we already have a Miles Morales animated version, but having an actual actor to play Miles Morales would be pretty cool too. So
I don't want those weapons in this neighborhood. I got a nephew who live here. Yeah, sorry, Miles. I'm not gonna make it.
Then Green Goblin dives in, snarling, "Can the Spider-Man come out to play?" And calling back his creepy line to Tobey Maguire Peter over the phone in the 2002 film.
Yep.
Can Spider-Man come out to play?
and he bombs the box, causing the spell to spill out around Liberty Island. I love how the VFX caused that tear to turn something that should be...
Yeah, I thought Liberty Island was going to be
like
toast.
that is way closer to us. And in this chaos, MJ slips and falls from the scaffolding, the framing exactly matching Gwen Stacy's slow-mo death drop in 2014, scaring the hell out of all of us. Tom Holland Peter dives after her, but he gets swiped by Goblin, so it's up to Andrew Garfield Peter to step up to catch her, redeeming his failure to save Gwen, but they do it in a really cool way, because notice this time, he focuses more on the leap itself to catch her in his arms, instead of trying to snatch her with his webbing, all to avoid that whiplash that actually caused Gwen to die.
Yeah, that broke me, because he was actually living with that guilt the entire time. And the fact of the matter is that now that time when he saved MJ, he focused more on thrusting his entire body and grabbing her instead of being in the air and whipping her and then causing the line to snap her body. And I was like, bro, that got me. I was like, that's something, I mean, you had to, and that was the only reason why he was carrying his punches, because the fact that he was living with that guilt for his entire time since that incident. So it's like in the comics, you know, Spider-Man was basically living that entire guilt when Gwen Stacy died, and then he pretty much ended up moving on to Mary Jane and they ended up falling in love. But during that time, Spidey was even pulling his punches on the Green Goblin, who was responsible for killing Gwen Stacy. So he was pulling his punches then. So, man, that's just deep.
That this poor guy has been obsessing over that decision every day of his life, and that is why he sobs in relief finally. We get another little sorcerer set up for Ned when the Cloak of Levitation catches him. We actually get a little leitmotif of Doctor Strange's theme music there too. Get this man a cloak. And then on the fallen giant Captain America's shield, Tom Holland...
And get this man the cloak. That's what T'Challa would say to Ned for sure. Engage all defenses and get this man the cloak.
Peter and Goblin to get out in it.
Yeah, final showdown.
Peter prepares to
kill Goblin,
lifting his glider to bring down on him the same way Captain America nearly...
Yeah, that was a Civil War reference too. And the fact that when Peter was about to stab Goblin, it was the same thing when Cap was going to stab the same thing with Iron Man when they fought in Civil War. But he aimed his shield at his reactor, in Tony's reactor. So pretty much just like, there was like so many references to that too, so.
He killed Iron Man in Civil War using the tool that Peter is now standing on. This kid is moments away from going full John Walker, but Tobey Maguire...
Yeah, John Walker did the same thing too. I was going to say in Falcon and Winter Soldier, he did the exact same thing, so.
Grabs the glider, even though Tom Holland Peter shoves that glider even closer to him. Ultimately, he helps him see the light and to make a different choice, and so Tom Holland proves his change by hitting Norman with the anti-serum and giving him a second chance. Meanwhile, the sky opens up to dozens of glowing silhouettes, presumably other characters who know Peter.
That glow right there, I wonder if that's MODOK. I'm thinking it could be MODOK. And, of course, MODOK appears in Marvel's Avengers 2, past that game, of course. But I wonder if they're going to introduce him to the MCU eventually, more than likely. But it looks like MODOK, I'm thinking. So, I see Scorpion right there. It could be Scorpion. I mean, there's like so many silhouettes. So, I'm looking forward to seeing more Marvel villains in the future. That's all I got to say, because there's just like so many.
Great Spider-Man from other universes. One of them holds a spear. Looks like Kraven the Hunter. Others match.
Yeah, Kraven was there too. I noticed that too. I mean, I think consider it's more of a Spider-Man thing. Let me debunk that. Considering the fact that it's focused more on a Spider-Man theme, I mean, it's gonna pretty much be about his villains anyway. But yeah, Kraven was a good call out too. Then there's Rhino too. Yeah.
The shape of Rhino. There's another one that kind of looks like Scorpion. I'm gonna go deeper into these in another video too. So Peter,
that's what I'm gonna do too. In the next video, I'm gonna go deeper than those two as far as like the silhouettes are concerned. So.
Doctor Strange realized that the only way to seal up these cracks is to complete the memory wipe spell as it was intended, meaning everyone will forget Peter is Spider-Man. Notice how, whereas the runes before were thinner, more rushed written, here they are bolder and more authoritative, like the runes cast by Scarlet Witch in the WandaVision final battle.
That was actually a good callback too, because I was actually getting WandaVisions for that too, or WandaVision vibes, because it reminded me of the final battle between Wanda and Agatha Harkness. So, but let's continue, wrap this up.
So Toby and Andrew make their final goodbyes, and Toby says it's what we do, recalling how Aunt May justified why you should help people. And Peter explains it all to MJ, and he promises he will come find her. Just reminds me a lot of that theme from Eternal Sunshine.
Yeah, I would kiss her too.
He's too powerful of a force to be bound by memory, and MJ tells Peter that she loves him, but she doesn't let him say it back to her, wagering that the first time he can say it to her on the other side, it'll be so pure and real that that could be the thing that awakens her. And then so, after the spell is complete, the world continues to know that Spider-Man exists, but the name Peter Parker means nothing to them. This is crazy, because it means that Ned and MJ still made it into MIT, but with no physical evidence of Peter Parker's history with them. So in addition to brainwashing everyone's memories, this spell must also have warped all of reality to erase documents, any kind of digital records, any physical mark that Peter Parker left on the world. I mean, does the guy have a birth certificate? A social security card?
Yeah, that's sad.
That should have to necessitate a new history to be conjured to replace the Peter history that was erased. But, and I hate to point this out, but if you think about it, Peter was often absent from his major events in his life, from his homecoming dance, from his field trips, from his school competitions. He was blipped for 5 years. It's depressing to realize this, but his erasure is not that disruptive to his friends' lives. I mean, essentially, this just means MJ and Ned spent more of their teenage years alone, which for MJ, reading a book by herself is just kind of who she is. Ned tinkering with his Legos is who he is. I mean, yeah, it's sadder the more you think about it, but it's true. That's why Peter makes this sacrifice, because he knows his loved ones can get by without him. And so when he finds them back in the Peter Pan coffee shop, himself a kind of Peter Pan stuck watching kids grow up and move on without him. However, MJ still wears the Black Dahlia necklace, so somewhere deep down she still loves him. And the coffee cup she gives him reads, "We are happy to serve you," a cup that he holds on to remind himself to serve. By the way, we actually saw the Sanctum Apprentice with one of those coffee cups earlier. She was trying to fix that same artifact that Thor also broke in Ragnarok. That cup also showed up on the dashboard of the Tracksuit Mafia in Hawkeye episode 5. And Peter almost says to MJ,
"Be happy to serve you." That logo was there too.
And he waits upon seeing the Band-Aid because he doesn't want to hurt MJ anymore. So to protect her, for now, he walks away. Peter visits May's grave. You'll notice the flowers cover the birth and death dates. I guess because, as Tony Stark observed when he first met May in Civil War, we never do quite know how old May is. Happy shows up, doesn't know who Peter is, but he compares this feeling to losing Tony. And Peter sets up his new apartment.
And there's also on May's tombstone that says, "When you help someone, help everyone." That's actually a saying from Marvel Spider-Man 2, because that was actually her catchphrase and Feast's catchphrase. When you help someone, you help everyone. Martin Lee said it, and May said it. Peter said it to Miles, and same thing like that. So, yep. So I'm surprised that Erik didn't catch that, but I caught it. So I'll even write to him and comment to him about that too. So.
I am praying that they can find a way to make Mr. Ditkovich his landlord. You'll notice he
Mr.
has
Ditkovich, yep.
book, and that's because this guy has no academic record anymore. Also, we see he sets up his Palpatine Lego, which was the first we saw of Ned Leeds back.
Yeah, because Peter's a Star Wars fan too. So.
Brighter blues and swings out past 30 Rockefeller Center, where the upcoming finale of Hawkeye will be set. I don't think we'll see Spider-Man swinging in the background of that, but a guy can dream. Being a stranger to the community.
Yep, and on top of that, you know, that was actually the Rockefeller. That was actually where Hawkeye and Kate Bishop did their final battle there too. So, yeah, but yeah, like I said, they're all set in the same universe.
The Peter Parker relied on is so painful, but it does force this kid to mature into the selfless hero that his forebears showed him how to be. At times, the life of a hero is a lonely one. All those people are still there, and they may not remember, but they still love him. And one day, he will find his way home. That is everything I found in this heart-wrenching and beautiful Spider-Man film. But there's so much more I want to say about this movie, so to support our channel and help us do that, please check out one of those great merch options at NewRockstarsMerch.com. That strange entitlement design is calling to you.
Yeah, so that's pretty much it. You know, that's pretty much the breakdown. And again, in another video, I'm going to talk about the silhouettes and all the Spider-Man villains that were there too. So forget that I mentioned MODOK. I mean, even though he's considered an Avengers villain, he's still part of the Marvel Villains Rogues too, or part of the Marvel Villains Rogue Gallery. But yeah, and it's like I was saying just earlier, a few minutes ago, that Tom Holland, Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire, they each bring the character elements of Spider-Man to the table in their own way, because that's what Spider-Man represents in the comics. He's a combination of everything. He's dorky, he's charismatic, he's talkative, he's everything. So yeah, so he represents pretty much everything on top of that, man. He's good with the girls too, and you know, he's a lover and everything like that. So yeah, so Spider-Man's an everyman. So But yeah, that's pretty much the breakdown. I'm gonna do more breakdowns in the future too, so I hope you guys enjoy. Check out my boy Erik Voss and new Rockstars and the Real Rejects and Comic Pop 2, and of course Comics Explain and Comics Historian. Those are the guys that I follow, that I pretty much get all my information from. I do my own research, but I also look at some of the other YouTubers too, who also have vast knowledge as well. So I'm looking forward to collaborating with those guys in the future though. So, but anyway, you guys have a great night, and I'll definitely see you guys in the next video. Until then, take care, peace, and one love.